What is up, Packers fans, and welcome back to the Daily Draft, brought to you by Brewski Light Lager, the best can in all of Wisconsin, from our good friends over at Badger State Brewing. Just minutes away from Lambeau Field, they have all sorts of awesome stuff going on draft week, so check them out today. It is the show that you have all been waiting for. Wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver. Jacob Morley, that's all that we've heard. Wide receiver, wide receiver. The Packers did not trade for DK Metcalf and give him $150 million. They did not reunite with MVS. They did not do anything yet. Don't know 100% when this one comes out. So we're going to throw a disclaimer out here. This is being recorded on Tuesday, March 18th in the morning. I don't know if they're going to sign Amari Cooper in a kind of a better version of the Sammy Watkins signing. I don't know, if they're going to do like a Devin Funchess type thing with somebody. But as of right now, they have done nothing. So what is their situation or need? Let's run through it. Christian Watson tore his ACL in the loss to the Bears in Week 18. I think he will, at a minimum, use the PUP time period. Some people have said Week 11, Week 12. Christian does get hurt a lot, but he has been a relatively quick healer. And I'm just not going to count him out, but I will probably count him out for the first 6 weeks, which would be that PUP time period. Romeo Doubs, his illness before the Bears game is what forced Green Bay to have to activate Watson 1 week probably before he was ready to go. His concussion issues, et cetera, et cetera. Is he even a part of their future? Is he going to be on this team? Now, they're not going to release him, but he could be a trade candidate. They're looking for bounce backs from Jaden Reed after a great rookie season and from Dontavion Wicks, who many people thought would take that next step. Instead, kind of had the Devontae Adams sophomore slump. And as exciting as the two have been in spurts, I do think that we probably need to move on from Bo Melton and Malik Heath as far as being a part of the long-term plan. I think both of them could be your fifth wide receivers on a really good team, but they need more ahead of them, or at least more production ahead of them, to not kind of roll the roster over and maybe throw a top 100 pick or two in those spots and kind of refresh things a little bit. No matter what, though, those guys probably not part of the long-term plan, and both Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs are on an expiring deal. Jacob Morley, your thoughts on their need at wide receiver?
I think it's a position that you just always need to be adding talent to the room. And you look at how these receivers are getting paid as well right now. If you've got a guy that needs to get paid like that, that's great. But if you don't, this is what you need to do. You keep rolling them through. And I don't think wide receiver is ever going to turn into like a running back where these guys are just completely devalued and not getting paid. But I do think with just the way the current landscape of football is set up, from prep to college to pro, there's a lot of guys that are coming in ready to play right now. And I think there's a few in this draft that could come in and be a wide receiver one immediately from jump. And that's kind of what they need, right? That's been the whole thing all offseason, is they need who's your go-to guy on 3rd and 7, which is hilarious because when Devontae was here, that was the gripe. They go to him too much on 3rd and 7. And so it's one of those things. You can win either way. That's the bottom line. You can win either way. The Packers were not worse for having Devontae Adams on 3rd down. And even if they went to him too much, that did not make them worse. The Packers are not bad because they have, 4 or 5 young guys that can play. And I think for them in that room, what they're going to have to lean into is hoping, Christian is I don't know even what the plans are for him this year. We'll find out more as we get closer to the season. But between Romeo, Reed, and Wicks, you hope one of those guys can take a step. That's kind of where you're at. And it's not – they're talented. Any 3 of them could. You've got kind of 3 shots right there, three in the chamber, if you will, that you hope one of those guys kind of steps up and becomes that player. I don't think they care who it is. They just want one of them to do it. And I think they still have faith in those guys. They should still have faith in those guys. But it is one of those things that if they don't, or even if they do, I think you still want to add talent.
I agree. And I think they went, I mean, they've gone now 2 years since taking one, right? Or I guess the Reed and Wicks was 2 years ago, right? So they did not invest in a wide receiver last year. You're now at the 4-year anniversary of the Watson and Dobbs picks. So you're in a situation where you're either going to have to make long-term commitments or you're going to have to draft and continue to get more bites at the apple, get more swings at the plate, whatever metaphor you want to use, but you're going to have to get another shot here. This class overall, I would say that it doesn't have like your Julio Jones, Marvin Harrison Jr. number one with a bullet. Like there's no way this guy busts type. And even sometimes those guys go bust, but like there is not your archetype AJ Green like one, Jamar Chase one, right? Where it's just like, oh, this guy should go in the top 5 because you can build your whole passing offense around him for the next 10 years. I don't see that guy in this class. The closest thing to it is a more specific type of archetype. I am a Drake London comp, which he was a top 10 pick. Shout out to Drake London, by the way. And that's Tetaroa McMillan from Arizona, 6'5", 215, allegedly running either in the high 4.4s, low to mid 4.5s. He's not a burner, but it doesn't matter when you have the catch radius that he has, when you have the skills that he has, when you watch him on film. Again, he's not an MHJ. He's not a Julio. He's not an AJ Green, Jamar Chase type as a prospect where it's like, oh, this guy's great. It's just top 5 overall. Moving on. But I really like him at the top of this class.
Yeah, he's kind of the guy, and he is our number one wide receiver in the draft guide. But I do think there's a player that might even be a better, cleaner fit in Green Bay than him, and we'll talk about him in a second. But with Tet, I don't think they're all interesting because McMillan doesn't surprise me if he goes top 12. It doesn't surprise me if he's there in the early, late teens, early 20s, maybe even at 23. I don't know. There's been a lot of weird stuff circulating about McMillan. I mean, people talking about 4.7s, 4.8s for this guy.
That did not happen. Yeah, I don't think. I think everybody agreed that didn't happen. But yeah,
yes. And so take it as you will. 4.55 is for me is fine. That's for his athletic profile. That is perfectly fine. He can be a very highly productive player in the NFL with that type of speed.
And he's the power forward the Packers haven't had in a while. Lazard was like a homeless man's version of that, but just your go up and get it bucket getter type, right? Like they've always kind of had the homeless man's version of that. Like remember when their jump ball guy was Ruvel Martin, right? That has not been something that they have really ever prioritized. It's always been the wings, right? Like I talk about building a wide receiver room like a basketball team. We've had a couple of point guards in Randall Cobb and Jaden Reed and guys like that. But it's been a lot of the like wing body types, like the 6 foot to 6'3", your Greg Jennings, though Greg might have been 5'11", but your Greg Jennings, your Jordy Nelson, your Devontae Adams, your James Jones. It's all of the like versatile types, not the 6'5", 6'6" guys, or none of the 5'8", 5'9" guys. They're not into that. Matthew Golden qualifies, I think, from a size perspective. I get it, right? Like I have a decent grade on Golden, really unproven and frankly in the spots where he's done it, unimpressive against man coverage. It's a zone league. I don't know. Where are you at on Matthew Golden?
I'm a big fan. I like Golden a lot, but my initial like infatuation with him started as like end of second
like 54.
Yeah. And now it's kind of like, well, if you want him, you have to pick him at 23. 100%. And there's just guys I'd rather have at 23 at the wide receiver position. So I think he's interesting too because he's got good vertical. He's a good vertical threat. And you look at like what they're losing with Watson not being healthy. Yeah. And I think he's immediately kind of what you look at and go, well, this guy can do it. Although if you watch the film, man, he does not look like a 4.2 guy on film. I thought he was running worse. He's like a solid to good vertical threat. But man, when you run a 4.2, I expect a little
You
bit
should be
more.
dusting guys. Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit more on tape than that. So he's a good, fun player. I would not be mad at all if he was a Green Bay Packer, but there's just guys I'd rather have at this point as kind of the dust has settled with this group.
I know this is lazy, but if he's Xavier Worthy, and now you have a year of, and so this is kind of cheating because now you have a year of watching Xavier Worthy with the best QB on the planet. I'm not taking Xavier Worthy at 23.
No.
And it's a lazy comp. I get it, right? Same school, super fast guy, whatever. I'm not taking that at 23, and I don't know how much more I'm getting from Matthew Golden. Like, look, man, if they trade down and take Matthew Golden, or somehow, if he ends up being a Green Bay Packer, I'm sure I'll talk myself into it. But I'm not doing like backflips. If they move up 6 spots and give up their 3rd round pick to take Tet, you're going to be with me on draft night. There aren't going to be pants. I don't even know where they're going to go, but they're going to be off, and we're just going to be partying like it's 1999. The pants would stay on for Matthew Golden.
Yeah, and that's fine. I mean,
we're gonna talk about this in a second. There is or go ahead.
I was just gonna say, if this is what usually happens though in Green Bay, is there's a wide receiver everyone likes. If they're interested in them, they take a different one, and then the different one usually ends up being better. Green Bay.
That's the original version of that was Chad Jackson.
Yep.
And Greg Jennings. That was the original version of that.
People were pissed.
Yes, they were mad.
Chad Jackson guy. Why would you take this Western Michigan kid?
Yeah.
And you know,
I think Greg Jennings had like more yards in the Super Bowl than Chad Jackson had in his entire career. Anyway, I think there's just a bevy of really, really good day 2 options. I think that there's going to be that. I think they take one at 54. Like if you said, what is their pick at 54? I think it's, my honest opinion is that it is somebody on the defensive front, a tackle or an end at 23, and a wide receiver at 54. That is my best actual guess. And there's a bunch of great day 2 options that we can talk about. After that, I think it gets thin. Like thin.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a Dobbs or a Wicks in this class. I don't like any of the round 4, round 5, round 6 guys. And I know those guys are supposed to have holes, right? Like that's a normal expectation. But yeah, like I don't love the non-top 100 dudes. There's not one where I'm like, ooh, this could be really interesting. I mean, I guess for me, there's a couple that could be sort of interesting and could have specific roles, but I think they're more like specific roles. I don't think you're going to find a guy like a Wicks where if he stops dropping the football, he's a legitimate starting Z in the NFL. I don't see that guy in this class.
I'll give you one. This guy recently kind of popped up on my radar.
Are you giving away at the end here, or
no? This isn't one of those guys.
Okay, all right.
This is a tier 1 Packer, Ross, a day 3 type guy, and it's the Arkansas's Isaac Tesla. He is
Elon's guy.
Elon, not actually related to Elon. I think, and I think it's pronounced more like coleslaw, like Tesla.
Not just Tesla.
Yeah, but I could be wrong on that. But he is, he's a legit 6'4", 205, can run like the wind.
It's production is the problem, right?
Yeah. Well, so here's the thing, though.
Yeah.
This is the interesting thing with him. When he came up to Arkansas, he was still productive, but he just was kind of buried by Andrew Armstrong, who is also a really high Packers fit and kind of in the same range. But he just never really acclimated to the offense in the SEC like he did. He was he was like a 500-yard, 700-yard guy, but then just wasn't like the main guy. At Hillsdale College, D2, shout out, he was very productive. Like he was like the most productive D2 receiver in the nation before he came to Arkansas. So I don't know, because I know the Packers value production. I don't know how they're going to look at that. We're like, yeah, you were super productive at this D2 school, and then you went to the SEC and we're not as productive. So I don't know. But he's a lot of fun. And he's someone that I think, like on day 3, he's a guy that maybe you could get a little bit excited about, that maybe doesn't have a ton of buzz. And who knows, maybe not having a ton of buzz amongst us means he's going to go round 3 and be one of those guys who are like, oh, okay, the NFL liked him. But he's a guy that on day 3, like you talk about, not a lot of guys that you can like sift through and be like, this guy could be a legitimate player in the NFL. He's who I would bank on, and he's who I would guess has the best shot, because he's got the athletic tools and he's got some of the goods as far as like a route runner and things of that nature.
Okay. All right. Fine. Brief tiering discussion. What does Green Bay like at the wide receiver position? Without, like I said, without giving too much away, but what do they like to see?
Yeah, they don't want a 5'8" guy. That's for sure.
Yep.
You need to hit a certain benchmark as far as height. They like density as well. Like when they picked like the 2 guys that were under their thresholds for height were Randall Cobb, and Randall Cobb was closer than a lot of people realize, and then Amari Rodgers, who was not close at all. But those guys were both pretty dense, especially Amari Rodgers. He was built like a run.
He was, but the legend, it continues to grow that pick was made under duress.
I don't know. Could have been. That was a weird draft. We could do a whole other. They could do a Netflix documentary on that.
On the 2 COVID drafts.
That 48. Well, even in Green Bay on that 72-hour span where we're sitting there just, on the couch.
Never forget. I was in Shields.
Oh, Aaron Rodgers wants a trade.
Yeah, what? I was in Shields.
What is happening? So that was
my phone's just.
It was just completely out of nowhere.
Yeah.
So that was fun, and that whole draft class was didn't work out. But that's neither here nor there, and we're talking about this year's wide receivers. So
all right.
Where were we?
We're at why people should buy the guide to find out what actually the tiers system is for the Green Bay Packers.
So I'm just going to give you some names that were tier 1, and it's usually, there are not a lot. It's usually like, I think the last 4 or 5 years, it's been like 4 or 5 players.
It's not tier 1 is not a shotgun approach, people. Just so you know,
it is it's a pretty narrow scope. But guys that were tier 1s, Christian Watson was a tier 1. Romeo Doubs was a tier 1. Jaden Reed was about a half an inch away from being a tier 1. Or no, Jaden Reed was like 5 pounds away from being a tier 1. Dontavian Wicks was a tier 1. Grant Dubose was a tier 1. Bo Melton is a tier 1. Malik Heath was not. But it's just
UDFA though. UDFA. That's that's why.
Yeah, and so, but it's these guys that's who they draft. That is their archetype, and that is something that
it will narrow down the scope of wide receivers that you need to pay attention to.
Yep.
And know their names and know what they're about going into the draft, if that's what you like as a Packers fan.
Yep.
Okay. Time to take him to church. Let us talk about our Lord and Savior, Luther Burden. Because I took him in round 1 on Mock Draft Monday yesterday. Again, don't know when you're getting this. This was recorded on the day after St. Patty's Day, March 18th. And somebody said, give me a wide receiver who does more than catch screen passes. And I said, sir, how dare you? 40 catches beyond 10 yards. Lots of short catches at the line of scrimmage, or between 1 and 9 yards. Slant God, Luther Burden.
Mm-hmm.
But 40 receptions at 10 yards or longer in the last 2 years. And if you look at PFF's receiving grades in the 20+, he was a 99.7 in 2023, the highest graded deep ball receiver in college football in 23. And it didn't get that much worse in 24. He is a threat. And just because he's sweet with the ball in his hands and they like to get it to him around the line of scrimmage, do not sleep on Luther Burden's ability to get deep.
Yeah, you know who else is sweet with their ball in the hands, with the ball in their hands, and the team likes to get them the ball around the line of scrimmage, but can also do everything else. He just got paid more than any other player, non-quarterback in the NFL, and that's Jamar Chase. Am I comping Luther Burden to Jamar Chase? Not really. I think if he would have come out and done the 2023 stuff in 2024, I think we're not even talking about him as a potential pick at 23. And I think people are maybe throwing that comp around a little bit more. His 23 tape is sweet.
Can I give you a Luther Burden comp?
Can I guess?
Go ahead.
DJ Moore.
Oh, DJ Moore.
Is that it?
Yeah, you nailed it. It's DJ Moore.
Yep. Good player. And
I think he can be better, but I think that's where your kind of upside is.
Yeah, and that's because DJ Moore is that way, like screen merchant in the NFL, and because he's really good at it. But guess what? He'll beat you deep too. He'll beat you intermediate. Like he can beat you anywhere, just because you're good at that. And I said the other day, I was like, Luther Burden is this year's can't versus hasn't been asked to award.
Right, Justin Jefferson, he's a slot. Oh, really?
Yeah, Chris Olave, he's a slot. No, I mean you can do it, but you can play on the outside.
Let's talk about our other Lord and Savior, who, by the way, Mel Kiper Jr., shout out to Mel, just took at 23 overall in the mock draft that I believe he dropped today.
Yep.
And that is Emeka Egbuka. I mean, so in this draft, Tet McMillan goes at 20, and if they didn't move up to 20 to take Tet McMillan, I would be devastated because I don't know what it would take to go from 23 to 20, but it isn't much. If it ended in them getting Emeka Egbuka, I wouldn't care. And I get it, right? Like, he's a wide receiver too. I don't care. You know who else was a wide receiver too in college? Justin Jefferson. Just because he has played with Jeremiah Smith and Olave and you'll go on down the list does not mean that he is not a stone cold killer. And of course, Marvin Harrison Jr. Marvin Harrison Jr. and Jeremiah Smith are both going to be wide receiver one in their classes. Emeka Egbuka absolutely could be one of the best 32 wide receivers in the NFL.
Yeah.
And I think the whole wide receiver one conversation is about as dumb as you could possibly get. But I don't care that he was below MHJ and below Jeremiah Smith in the pecking order. You don't have to be the best wide receiver at your school to be one of the best 5 wide receivers in your draft class, or in my opinion, one of the best 3.
Well, and
he's just day one ready.
It's different because it's Ohio State too. Like it's right. Like another guy that was a wide receiver 2 in this year's draft class is Savion Williams from TCU. That's a lot different.
Right.
When the wide receiver 1 is Jack Besh, who's good.
Yes.
Nice player, but he's not going top 10.
Right.
And so look at the guys Egbuka was playing second fiddle to. It's Harrison Jr., who went top 5, and then Jeremiah Smith,
who will go top 5.
Will go very high. Yeah. So it's just kind of one of those things where I just don't care. And like to your point, I said this on Pack a Day the other day with Dorf. Like, if there is one player in this year's draft class that could come in from day one and raise the offense the highest, it's
Egbuka,
because he's ready. He is ready to be that guy. Is he ready to be like your dominant wide receiver 1, like you talked about? I don't know if he's ever that, but that's why I think he fits really well in Green Bay, because he can be their wide receiver 1,
right?
People in with a bunch of other really good players,
right?
And I think that's valuable, just to have a guy that I think
he doesn't solve their deep threat need, but I don't think you make a decision. And I'll say this in general. I don't think you make a decision. I think Egbuka is a way better player than Matthew Golden. Mm-hmm. I don't think you take Matthew Golden over Egbuka because Christian Watson's going to miss the first 10 weeks. That is not how you build a team. Take the better player, period. Go get a deep threat in round 4.
Yep.
You were a very good team with MVS as your deep threat, who you took in round 5. Right? Yeah. It doesn't have to be the guy you take in the top 60. Take the good football player. That's Emeka Egbuka. Speaking of good football players, I think there's some solid starter quality dudes, some, James Jones types, right? Jordy Nelson I think that's a high bar to clear. I think Jordy was a legitimate, all pro guy at the peak of his powers. But Jack Besh, Alec Iomanor, and then my guy, Jaden Higgins, these would be your Packers day 2 types, although Jaden Higgins is testing himself out of being a day 2 type. Jaden Higgins is testing himself into, we have to give up multiple picks to go up and get him early Friday night, a la Christian Watson.
Or just take him at 23 if you like.
Or just take him at 23. I wouldn't care.
He's weird. I was talking about this with someone the other day, just like, who are the cleanest wide receiver prospects in this draft class? Like, okay, well, McMillan's got the speed stuff. Some people aren't going to like that. Burden's got can he play outside, which I think he can. But that's still a question because he hardly ever did it. Ibuka played in the slot too, but he's got plenty of film of him being successful on the outside. So he's super clean. And then Higgins, he's clean as it gets. Like he's productive. He's athletic. He's played on the outside. He's been the go-to guy in an offense. They run their offense through him. So he's super clean as well. And I wouldn't be shocked if he does sneak in around 1.
I will give you another super clean prospect, and it makes me a little sad because Green Bay just won't take him, and that's Xavier Restrepo. That's a 10-year slot receiver in a good offense, period. That's Wes Welker. It's Danny Amendola. It's pick one. I don't care. Randall Cobb. I mean, there are stylistic differences, but I just mean a 6 to 8 year run, 10-year run as this is the inside receiver and our offense is fine. That's Xavier Restrepo. I just think the ceiling, the floor might be a little low. The ceiling is so high. He's just going to be a good slot receiver in the NFL.
I think the only thing he's really missing is height, and it's not by that much.
No, he's thick.
He is the slot receiver.
Green Bay just doesn't need him unless they're going to move Jaden Reed to the Z.
Yeah.
Which you don't like.
I don't like that idea. But, I mean, if it means bringing in a guy like Restrepo, I might be more okay with it. But, yeah, so we'll see. He is a very good football player, though. Like, that's just –
He's a bucket getter, which Jordan Love does not have. I mean, Romeo Doubs kind of, but Romeo drops the ball too much to be a real bucket getter.
Yep.
I would like the idea. Okay, our Prince, Jalen Royals, speak on it.
Good player. You want to talk about like he reminds me of Greg Jennings in the
He's a bomber, man.
He can beat you deep. He can beat you intermediate. He can win. He can win all three levels. But I'm just mean like smaller conference, ultra productive. Got hurt last year. He was on pace for just silly numbers this year.
Well, early Greg was their deep threat despite being 5'11".
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he was good at it. Like you remember the Denver overtime game.
Yes, absolutely.
Got a mile high. But Jalen Royals is a guy that I think if they would bring him in, he could be potentially had maybe in round 3. I don't know. That worries me.
Crazy to me, but it could happen.
Well, I've seen it, but I don't know. And I think some of that is because he was injured, so maybe he'll fall a little bit. I don't know. I think you'd have to take him at the end of round 2 to make sure. And I think he will be there. I think he'll be there for the taking in round 2. But he's someone, came out, ran a 4.4. I think he looks faster than that on tape. And thick guy. Like
if they take him in round 2, I don't blink. I don't care what everybody else thinks. I would not blink.
No, not at all. And he's, to me, he can do a lot for this offense. He is the type of guy like, okay, maybe you miss out on someone in round 1 that you really wanted to take. I think Royals can come in immediately and be that threat, that vertical guy that teams have to at least respect when he's lined up on the outside. Because if you don't, he is going to beat you. And if that's all he can do his rookie year, then that's great. But he's the type of guy that could do something like that his rookie year and then eventually develop into a guy that's catching 80 balls a year. Like that's who he's been everywhere he's gone. So he's someone that I think is really interesting and exciting. And typically guys that are productive in college and then have good athleticism, like those guys,
they succeed. Yeah.
They come out more often than not.
Yeah.
And Wheels is that guy.
I'm going to give you 2 smalls that they're just not going to take that some people like. Tez Johnson, Oregon, Isaiah Bond, Texas. They just aren't going to do it.
Nope.
Trey Harris is at least interesting. He's an old, but I like him. It's 6'3", 210, really, really, really high level PFF grades in 23 and 24. Just consistent, efficient. He's kind of James Jonesy to me. I like Trey Harris as a James Jones type.
Yeah, that's the comp for him. Just a kind of a bully with the ball in the air. That's just what he does, and he wins like James. James won vertically, not in your traditional sense. Like he was not running by guys, but he's 20 yards down the field just bodying people and going
without drawing OPI. Yes.
Yeah, and that's Trey. That's what he does. Guys like that are always interesting to me though too, because for every James Jones, there's a Laquan Treadwell.
I know. And I don't like those guys.
No, and then like the Hakeem, whatever from Iowa State. That massive Hakeem Butler that was massive and everyone loved him and he tested
so well that he got me. He He couldn't separate, but he tested well.
Like, well, he runs a fourth wide. He can
Traylon Burks.
Yep. So these guys, like
that one, I at least got right.
Yeah, these guys are tough to project because I don't know what it is that some of these guys can get away with. Like T. Higgins, that's how we won at Clemson,
right?
And he still does it.
And I was notoriously not a Higgins guy.
Yep.
One guy, last guy, before we kind of go a little bit deeper. Torrey Horton, we got good news on from a tiering. People thought he might be like 180 or even less. Comes in, clears Green Bay's bar for size, and he's sweet.
Mm-hmm. And with him, the other thing, this isn't on the tiered list. Like, this is not included, but it's kind of like a bonus because they always talk about it. And Ron Wolf always talked about this. He loved guys that return kicks. And Horton has 4 career punt returns for touchdown. Sure. And if you go watch it, like they're explosive, they're exciting. And so if he was
they project yak onto that.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you're not only are you explosive with the ball in your hands, but you see the field well with the ball in your hands, which is, equally as important. So he's someone that I think Green Bay could be very interested in. He's a little bit raw. He doesn't have like a full route tree. Colorado State didn't ask him to do much other than like drags and fades, but he's really good at them. And he's got the movement ability. And with some of these guys, you really have to. And I've talked about this in the DMs. I don't really care about your route tree in college.
Yeah.
People coming out and be like, oh, he's got a limited route tree. I don't care. He moves different.
Yeah, get him with a decent coach. I think you want to diversify your room. Like Jalen Royals in round 2 and then coming right back with Torrey Horton in round 4. That'd be a good diversification of the room. Goodbye, Bo Melton. Goodbye, Malik Heath. But that I think would be a nice infusion of talent. Guys we like late. Nick Nash, 6-year guy from San Jose State, won the Triple Crown. Green Bay loves productive guys. I'd love to see where he is. I know he's got height and weight enough for them. I'd like to see where he is on the agility side. I know he's an old, but they're going to take him. You can take him where you have to take an old. It's late. Former college QB. I love former quarterbacks at any position. I do. Defensive backs, right? Like I love guys because you have to understand so much to play QB, even at the high school level. Like, I love former QBs. I'm into Nick Nash. And then FCS football stand-up, Efton Chisholm is just as productive as it gets. I think he'd be a 5th, 6th, 7th round guy. He's kind of like your prototypical wide receiver 4. And it's just, okay, he can beat Lazard, right? I think not necessarily your exact same like player comp or style, but if he's your 4th guy and it's 3rd down and you just need to throw the ball to Efton Chisholm because he's on the other team's 3rd best corner, I think you can do it. And while that's not going to have people popping champagne, I think it's a valuable role in the NFL, and I think he makes it.
Yeah, I like Chisholm. I think he's a slot guy as well. But like where you're going to get him, you're just like, okay, well then we're gonna have certain packages for him to get him on the field.
Where you take him, if he even makes your 53, it's a good pick.
Yep.
Your guys, late guys.
One guy that's really interesting to me is Ricky White, the UNLV kid. He's skinny for what Green Bay would like, but again, when you're talking about where they would take him, I think he's a day 3 guy that has juice in the vertical game. But what interests me about him and what might interest Green Bay about him and give them reason to be like, we don't care if you're not 200 pounds. He's got 6 block kicks in his career. 6. That's insane. And so, like, can you come in here and we'll see if we can develop you into an NFL wide receiver, but buddy, we've got a role for you immediately. And he might be a guy that you could then say, well, they kept 7 wide receivers.
They kept a special teamer.
Ricky White is your guy that's going to play teams and just kind of a bonus project as well, because he does have some ability at the wide receiver position. But his comp, I'll give you his comp in the guide was Matthew Slater, the standout special team guy in New England for years and years and years.
Sure.
Slater was a wide receiver, but never really played. He just was a special teams guy. I could see Ricky White having that type of career. And then this is my all I can fix you guy.
I know what
And
this is.
his name's Dante Thornton from Tennessee.
Yeah.
Really explosive athlete, big.
It's
big.
your MVS attempt.
That's 100% who he is because he's a vertical threat. That's about all he can do. He runs fast, and
He's big.
Big, but even to the bad vert, MVS could not jump. Dante Thornton can't really jump either, which is hilarious for guys that can run that fast. Usually that's just like comes with it, but he can't. Thornton is bigger than MVS too. Like he's a little bit scarier with the ball in his hands. Like if he's coming at you like a freight train, and he's hard to get to the ground. If he's got a full head of steam, you just wonder like why was he not more productive? Why wasn't he better? He played for Oregon, which is just a throw the ball around the yard offense, and then he played in Tennessee, which is the exact same way. Like there are plenty of opportunities to put up big numbers in those offenses, and he didn't. So he's probably he's going to be a day 3 type that. For that reason, someone's just going to say, let's take a flyer on this kid. If he pans out, maybe you have a Nico Collins type on your hands, a guy that just was a really good athlete that figured it out, like came on in the NFL.
Now if he wasn't super productive.
Yep.
All right. I think we agree on this. They're taking one in the top 100. I think we both think that, right?
Yes.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for watching or listening. If you're on the podcast side, drink brewski. Buy the draft guide with promo code DAILY for $1 off and go Pack Go.